Who is the greatest racing driver of all time? That is the question that I posed to my friends for today's VINwiki survey panel. But for me, despite the amazing statistical arguments that you could make for Lewis Hamilton or Michael Schumacher or even Fangio, I think it's Ayrton Senna. His charisma, certainly on the track, but even more so off the track, and the raw talent that you see him have when you look back at his old races, to me, it was just unbelievable and unrivaled. It really makes you wonder what amazing things we would have seen out of Senna if we hadn't lost him so early at that accident at Imola. But I asked my friends what they thought. Who is the greatest racing driver of all time? And today's video is brought to you by Premier Financial Services. This is the 6th year that Premier has been a sponsor of us here at VINwiki, so we love them for that, but also because they make it easier than you could imagine to own and buy your dream car. Their simple lease is the most powerful tool in the world of exotic car financing. It gives you all the benefits of a lease, like the tax preferential treatment and the low payments, plus all the things that you assume are reserved for a regular car loan, like the ability to pay it off at any time, the ability to accumulate equity, and knowing where you stand thanks to their amazing amortization table. So check them out now at the link in the description below to see how easy it can be to afford your dream car with Premier. And here are our answers as to who is the greatest racing driver of all time.
Greatest race car driver ever for me, the legendary Juan Manuel Fangio, known as El Maestro. The other drivers used to stand up out of respect when he walked in the room. Smooth, just did everything right and was on a whole nother level of the best guys in his generation. Modern generation, I'm going with my admired competitor and friend, Bill Auberlen. Long career, I raced with him a lot. The man has so many starts and wins, been a BMW driver for most of his career, and I raced with him, and he raced you hard, never stab you in the back, and I respect and admire his ability and his etiquette. Tough but fair.
My pick for greatest race driver of all time is Mario Andretti, one of the only drivers to have won Driver of the Year, U.S. Driver of the Year, in three different decades. Actually, the only driver to have done that. Being able to win on road courses, paved ovals, and gravel courses, as well as winning in different championship series. He just transcended all forms and became the greatest driver of all time.
The best racing driver, in my opinion, has to be Jeff Gordon.
Who's the best racing driver of all time?
Ricky Bobby, he's an American hero. Shake and bake!
What about a real one?
Oh, Jeff Gordon. Yeah.
Mario Andretti. For me, it's, looking at all the different types of cars that not only Mario raced in, but he won in. I mean, from dirt tracks and sprint cars and USAC, Indy cars, Formula One cars, stock cars. I mean, won the Daytona 500. So, to me, he's the ultimate race car driver and still a legend.
The greatest racing driver of all time was Sterling Moss, and it's really captured in one day of racing when he set the record for the Mille Miglia. And I've always had that imprinted in my mind, and we miss Sir Sterling from being here at the Amelia.
Okay, believe it or not, I don't watch racing too much. I know the big names, the Andrettis, the Sennas. However, there's so many different disciplines of racing. There's so many different options out there to pick the best driver of all time. I don't have anyone that stands out as a Tiger Woods or Michael Jordan out there. However, I can say who I'd like to have dinner with most, and that's Danica Patrick.
The greatest race car driver of all time. Well, I'm here at Radwood about to unload Peach Pit. Here for Radwood 2023 here in Charlotte. And just right up the road, that's where the greatest driver of all time was born, right here in Kannapolis, North Carolina. That's right, kids, the Intimidator himself, Dale Earnhardt. We were at the Daytona 500. He was all over the big screens. They were still talking about Dale. You know why? Because he was more than a race car driver. He was an icon.
This week, we're talking about the greatest racing driver of all time. And if the name Tim Richmond doesn't fall out of your face, you need to find out who this man was. He raced in the Kart Series, the Champ Car Series, the Busch Series, and then on to Winston Cup. He started 2 Indy 500s, only to win Rookie of the Year in 1980. He qualified for 6 Daytona 500s. He had 3 starts in the Winston Cup All-Star race, only to finish 5th, 2nd, and 3rd. In 185 starts, Tim Richmond won 13 times. In 1987, while battling AIDS, he missed the first 10 races of the season. came back to Pocono and won, went on the next week to Riverside and won. He was named one of the 50 greatest NASCAR drivers of all time, and there is no way Dale Earnhardt Sr. would have ever had 7 championships had Tim Richmond lived.
Greatest racing driver of all time has to be Richard Petty. He brought us Petty Blue, he brought us safety devices, I'm pretty sure he brought us the Petty bars too. That man has saved some lives and put some smiles on people all around the world. Thank you, Richard Petty.
In my opinion, the best race car driver of all time was Ayrton Senna. Reason being, the level of competition was insane when that guy was driving. You had so many good drivers on the field. Michael Schumacher, Nigel Mansell, Mika Häkkinen, Alan Prost, Niki Lauda in his earlier career, and some say that Schumacher wouldn't have had as many championships if it wasn't for Senna passing away. You take that and you combine that with the crazy cars they were driving, bigger horsepower, less aero, manual transmission, insane car to drive, and then Senna, what I think really made him stand out against the other drivers was his ability to go fast in the wet. Now, a lot of you, I'm sure, watch F1 today, and one thing you'll notice is rain is a big equalizer. The car and the team don't matter as much, but when you put Senna in the rain, in those crazy cars, he always dominated, he always came out on top, and for those reasons, I think Ayrton Senna is the best race car driver of all time.
My personal favorite race car driver of all time, Mark Donohue. Mark Donohue was not just a racer, he was an innovator and an engineer. He was just as capable in building and conceiving a race car as he was winning with it. I mean, I love the stories of him acid dipping Camaros and Trans Am with Roger Penske. He couldn't lean up against the car. And also he drove the Porsche 91730, which is quite possibly the craziest race car ever conceived, aka the Can-Am killer. And the fact that he was able to do that means that he has the biggest set of balls of just about any guy to ever race a car. So my personal favorite, Mark Donohue.
So, well, it was very hard to pick anyone for the greatest driver of all times, especially a few friends. You had Seb, you had Kimi, you had, well, what I can say is André Lotterer has actually the longest career in single-seater. It's been like 20 years now on, but we're gonna ask him because he's just here, actually. So what's your, how long has it been, like 20 years?
Well, I'm 41 and I started single seaters when I was 16.
16.
So
then you have
math. 41 minus 16.
Okay, it's been like
without interruption. That's the thing.
No, yeah.
But I had continuous single seater since I was 16. So I don't know. Like it would be interesting to double check, but I think I probably had the longest streak in single seater.
Yeah, because he moved from Jaguar Racing before it became Red Bull Racing. Then he wasn't about to race, so he left for Japan. He won there. He won even the GT Championship with Lexus.
Super Formula, Super GT, yes, exactly.
So, well, he's the man. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then I did Le Mans, but I still continued racing Super Formula, and then went to Formula E, and I still race Formula E. So, still active, still kicking. So, thank you for selecting me.
The best race car driver, especially one that I know and have met, would be Denny Hulme. And because let's face it, the man could drive anything. He was amazing, and you did not mess with him. And then I'd have to go with my old friend Oscar Kowaleski, who was a great mentor to me throughout the 80s. And set me up with a lot of rides, including the Lamborghini LMO02, which I eventually forgave him for. But yeah, I would have to go with those two. They were just really amazing people, and Oscar was a complete and total mensch. Loved the guy.
Greatest racing driver of all time has got to be Ron Fellows. He's got his own driving school and even has a Corvette named after him.
When it comes to NASCAR, Jeff Gordon has always been a household name, and I used to pick him in all the racing games I played as a kid. However, when it comes to Formula One racing, Lewis Hamilton has to be the absolute best racing driver ever. He has 7 World Driving Championships with 103 Grand Prix wins, more than anybody else.
My pick has to be James Hunt. James Hunt was a spectacular driver. He wasn't always the fastest, he didn't win the most races, but he had a lot of heart. He raced everything, every time, to win. He didn't want to go for second, he didn't want to go for third, he would win. And if he couldn't win, Sadly, he would crash. That's why he named the nickname Hunt the Shunt. But he was spectacular in every race he ever did, and he went all out to win everything.
I think when it comes to cultural impact, making the sport way more popular in just sheer raw talent, it's very hard to ignore Senna for Formula One. It's an easy answer, but there's a reason why. He had a super unique driving technique that nobody else had. He was a monster in the rain, and he was a national hero of Brazil. And along with that, I would say Colin McRae for rally, absolute monster behind the wheel, had no fear whatsoever. And when it comes to impacting the United States in motorsport, I would choose Dale Earnhardt. Whether people loved him or hated him at the time for his aggressive driving style as the Intimidator, you cannot deny that the number 3 today is still associated with Dale Earnhardt 20 years later.
The greatest racing driver of all time, to me, is Sir Sterling Moss. He lived a life that got him so much respect from the way he drove. He survived his career in driving. To me, that is a huge thing of what makes somebody a great driver, surviving that career. I've heard so many awesome stories about him, and the racing that he did was in that golden era. The time that they did in the 722 still hasn't been beat.
Dale Earnhardt, hands down, no questions asked.
So the best race car driver of all time has got to be hands down Ayrton Senna. And I remember, as a little kid in elementary school, looking back at his footage from Donington in '93 when he starts all the way in the back and it's pouring rain. As soon as the cars take off, this guy makes it to first in the first half of the first lap, and I'll just never forget that and how it made me feel. And Ayrton Senna is just a legend.
I think the best driver of all time was actually a driver and a rider, Giacomo Agostini. He won 15 championships at the premier level, 7 years in a row in 2 different classes. Then went on to race at the Isle of Man TT. He won that 10 times, and that's the most insane race in the entire world. Then, like a few other riders before him, he went on to race Formula One, Formula 2, and actually won the British Formula One Championship.
So this person's going to edge out Ayrton Senna just barely for me, because first we got to establish what the greatest racing series of his all time. And of course, for me, it's NASCAR. This person grew up racing in the tough as nails, just hardest era of NASCAR. I'm a Southern-born, red-blooded American. It's number 3. It's Dale Earnhardt, 7 championships, 76 wins, 1 tough customer, the Intimidator. Dale Earnhardt, best ever.
Best racing driver of all time? That would be Irwin Cannonball Baker. In 1933, he set the New York to Los Angeles record that stood for almost 40 years. And he was over 50 years old when he did it. Throughout his career from the 1910s through the 1930s, he set 143 endurance driving records.
Greatest racing driver of all time, Ayrton Senna.
My vote would be for Dan Gurney. With this question, I sort of have to think it would be someone with competitiveness and different types of racing, and Dan Gurney did it with F1, NASCAR, IndyCar, Can-Am, and of course, Cannonball.
What I would think would make for the greatest racing driver would also be someone who is a mechanic and an engineer and knows the race car inside and out. You got to get the win, but also know how to fix it if you have a breakdown, if you need to get back out on track, and knowing the ins and outs of your car is essential to that. And for that reason, I think Bruce McLaren would top that list for me.
It's got to be Senna. And the reason why is because Senna, beyond what he did for the racing community, and although he doesn't have the most victories, it's what he stood for as an individual. He was so much more than just a driver. He was a visionary and somebody who gave back to his country and gave something to the racing series that was unheard of and in that time, and even to this day has not been eclipsed. Talk about his incredible passes in the rain and some of the most amazing racing we've ever seen. He had an ungodly ability to handle the car when the conditions got rough, and his instincts were beyond anybody else's we've ever seen.
Now, I was never a big racing fan, but Ken Block was always somebody I admired. He not only was a successful rally driver, but he brought the stunt-like gymkhana to the mainstream, to the internet, and he made that popular. So he not only inspired people of being a rally driver, but when you're a kid and you watch all those the cool stunts and everything he does with those cars, that inspires you to be a car guy more than anything. So not everyone can have that kind of double achievement under their belt. And frankly, I'm really proud of what he did, and it's a real shame of the way he went. Rest in peace, Ken Block. You'll always be missed.
So there you have it. Let us know in the comments who you think is the greatest racing driver of all time. It's always a fun discussion to have. And again, thank you to Premier Financial Services for supporting this video, this month of content on VINwiki, and for being a partner of VINwiki for the last 6 years. Check out these videos because they are another great way for you to learn more about Premier.